The Arctic is heating up, and as the ice melts, it opens up new shipping lanes, resources, and the potential for conflict over them. But the US military has just 3 ancient icebreakers to clear a path through Arctic waters, compared to China's 5 and Russia's more than 40, giving those rival countries a big advantage to project power into the far north. All that might change though. The Arctic Security Cutter Program could give the US Coast Guard 11 brand new medium icebreakers over the next decade, but problems remain as the service struggles to build a heavyweight to handle the thickest ice sheets. Today we'll be diving into the world of Coast Guard icebreaking, a chronically underfunded capability that may be more important now than it ever has been. We don't often talk about the Coast Guard on this channel, so let's briefly go over what it does. Yes, it is a branch of the military, but during peacetime it operates under the Department of Homeland Security. Coasties, as the members of the Coast Guard call themselves, do law enforcement missions like capturing drug boats or stopping illegal fishing. They also protect ports and coastlines from terror attacks and help enforce environmental protection laws. And thanks in part to Ashton Kutcher, they're probably best known for flying into terrible storms to rescue distressed mariners.
I thought you were going fishing!
Just as a general rule, we will not tolerate anybody being mean to the Coast Guard here. We love the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard loves us. We would like to keep it that way because out of all the branches of the military, they're kind of the only ones that always have a mission every single day. I know you guys might not like that, but if you ever served in the Army or the Marine Corps and anything else, think about how much time you spent just sitting on your ass. Anyway, we love the Coast Guard. You love the Coast Guard too, so be nice. During World War II, coasties escorted convoys, sank German U-boats, and landed troops and supplies under fire from Normandy to Guadalcanal. They disrupted Viet Cong supply lines in Vietnam and captured enemy mine layers during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Despite its decorated history and its constant mission, the Coast Guard has historically been the most chronically underfunded military service, especially during government shutdowns, where coasties often have to work without getting paid. So where does icebreaking fit into all of this? Well, it dates back to at least World War II, when Coast Guard icebreakers helped escort convoys to and from Greenland, which was incredibly important to the Allied war effort. We touched on that and how important Greenland is in our video on Greenland, so go check that out. Today, Coast Guard icebreakers rescue ships trapped in pack ice, clear the way for cargo and oil tankers, and help build and supply Arctic radar stations. But one of its most important missions is Operation Deep Freeze, an annual trip to Antarctica where the Coast Guard clears miles of ice so cargo ships can resupply the scientists at McMurdo Station. There, they conduct research on everything from climate change to cancer research, and it's a pretty cool job that doesn't get enough attention, and that's probably why the Coast Guard icebreaker fleet is in such a poor state today. Arctic sea ice may be melting, but there's still enough of it floating around today and getting in the way to make icebreakers an absolute must for sea travel in the far north. The way icebreakers work is actually pretty cool, and that's a pun, and David wrote that it was a pun in the script, so now I'm going to tell all of you that that was a pun. Instead of smashing through the ice like a karate chop through a slab of wood, the whole of a traditional icebreaker is designed to climb up on top of the ice where the big ship's weight crushes it from above, kind of like when wrestlers dive from the top rope in WWE. Heavy icebreakers usually can break through 6 feet of ice at a speed of about 3.5 miles per hour, but by backing up and going at it again, these ships can break through ice up to 21 feet thick. The Coast Guard has a fleet of smaller icebreakers for patrolling the Great Lakes and seawaters closer to shore, but the polar icebreakers can cross oceans to tackle the Arctic or the Antarctic. Unfortunately, hulls designed to break ice usually don't handle all too well on the high seas, which means an icebreaker isn't well suited for doing Coast Guard things in other waters. That kind of complicates the procurement thing because people don't really want to spend a lot of money on one thing that does one thing when like one ship can do 4 different things. Anyway, we're going to get back on it. Still, the service had at least 6 of them when the heavy icebreaker Polar Star entered service in 1976. At the time, Polar Star was one of the most powerful icebreakers in the world. At 390 feet long, it can go through miles of thick ice, like that one time in 2006 when it broke 97 miles of ice to resupply McMurdo Station. The thing is though, Polar Star was only supposed to serve for 30 years, and now we're on year 50 and it shows. The Los Angeles Times did a really great article about the boat back in 2019 describing how the toilets jammed and overflowed, how there was rust everywhere, lead paint was peeling from the walls, and the engines were constantly blowing seals and leaking oil. Crew members even had to search eBay for replacement parts, and one coastie was awarded for using a surfboard repair kit to fix a generator. The LA Times described a routine where every summer Polar Star limps its way to Antarctica and back, then spends the rest of the year getting repaired for the next hop. One coastie had a particularly colorful description of the ship, saying, "You can tell she's ready to quit, but she can't. She's like a cranky old Texas woman. You never want to talk bad about her, you just want to call her beautiful every day and she'll work fine for you." That's not a great endorsement for a ship that 1,000 people at McMurdo Station are relying on for their food and supplies, not to mention the 134 crew members stuck on it for 11,000 miles through the Pacific. Unfortunately though, Polar Star is the Coast Guard's only heavy icebreaker. Its sister ship, Polar Sea, had a catastrophic engine failure in 2010 and has been a spare parts farm ever since. The medium icebreaker Healy entered service in 2000, which sounds younger than Polar Star, but it's getting rickety too. The ship had to cancel missions in 2020 and 2024 due to electrical fires, and like with Polar Star, a lot of the parts on board are antiquated and really hard to replace. The Coast Guard's newest icebreaker, Storis, also has a lot of shortcomings. Storis started life as the IVIC. It was designed to tow and anchor oil drills in the high north, but IVIC was never very good at it. On its maiden voyage in 2012, IVIC's electrical system blacked out, one of its engines failed, and it lost control of the oil drill rig it was towing, which meant that the Coast Guard had to fly through a storm to rescue the ship's crew. After that performance, oil companies were not interested in IVIC. According to a ProPublica investigation, without any buyers, the Louisiana company that built the ship donated a lot of money to members of Congress, who then appeared to pressure the Coast Guard to adopt it. They were not interested at first, with one admiral even saying the ship may at best marginally meet our requirements, but by 2024 the service had kind of screwed itself out of any other options. You see, back in 2019 the Coast Guard awarded a contract for building up to 3 heavy icebreakers based on the design of a German icebreaker already being built. Using an already mature design makes everything easier. Just ask the Navy about their Constellation class frigates that they've canceled. Hopefully though, their choice of the Legend class Coast Guard cutter for the Constellation class replacement works out. Anyway, the Coast Guard planned to have the first icebreaker delivered by 2024. That timeline may have been too optimistic, according to a GAO report. The COVID-19 pandemic also threw a wrench in the works, and the Coast Guard made a lot of changes to the design, which led to years of delays as engineers worked out all the kinks. If you watched our video about the Navy's Constellation-class frigate, you'll know that the military tends to take mature, off-the-shelf ship designs and then over-design them to death after spending a lot of money. Now the Coast Guard doesn't expect a heavy icebreaker any time earlier than 2030, 6 years later than expected. Without a replacement, it was actually easy for Congress to make the case that the Coast Guard needed IVIC, because it kind of did. In 2024, the service bought the IVIC for $125 million, with another $25 million required to upgrade it for Coast Guard use. Now named the Storis, the ship had its maiden military voyage in July and was commissioned in August, and that $25 million in upgrades is kind of a rolling program. So to recap, we have 3 ocean-going icebreakers. Polar Star is on hospice care, Healy is a little too small and getting old, Storis didn't even work before it joined the Coast Guard, and the earliest replacement is still at least 4 years away. that's a pretty bleak picture, but a recent development may make things just a little brighter. In July 2025, the Coast Guard got the biggest funding boost in its history, $25 billion as part of President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That money will help pay for 3 polar security cutters, which is the Coast Guard's term for heavy icebreakers that can cut through both Arctic and Antarctic ice. But it will also help pay for up to 11 new Arctic security cutters. These medium icebreakers are cheaper than the heavies and operate in the shallower areas where most Arctic Coast Guard missions take place, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. The Coast Guard wants these 360-foot-long Arctic security cutters to be able to cut through ice 3 feet thick at a speed of 3 knots, and have a flight deck and hangar for an HH-60 helicopter that can fly rescue and resupply missions. But the most important feature of these Arctic cutters is that they can be made quickly. Instead of reinventing the wheel, the Coast Guard is using an already mature design being built in Finland, which, according to one estimate, has designed 80% of the world's icebreakers and built 60% of them. So, 2 of the Coast Guard's copies will be built in Finland, with the first to be delivered in 2028, which is just 2 years away. The other 4 will be built in Louisiana, with the first expected in 2029. The contract for the other 5 Arctic cutters was awarded just last month when the Coast Guard announced Finland would build 2 more ships based on a slightly different but already mature design, with the first coming in 2028. American shipbuilders would learn from the Finns and then take that insight back to Texas to build the next 3. It was not clear how long it would take for all the new Arctic cutters to be built, but even having 3 more before 2030 would be a big boost for the Coast Guard, because the Arctic is becoming more important by the day. Last month, the Intergovernmental Arctic Council reported that the number of unique ships operating in the Arctic has gone up 40% since 2013. Part of the reason for the bump in traffic is because going north is a really fast shipping route. When the weather cooperates, it takes just 20 days to steam from Asia to Europe through the Arctic versus 40 to 50 through the Suez Canal. Of course, it's not guaranteed that the weather will cooperate in the Arctic, but there are plenty of natural resources in terms of oil, natural gas, minerals, and fisheries that may grow more popular. The high north is also priceless from a military perspective, because what makes it a shortcut for shipping also makes it a shortcut for missiles and long-range bombers. That's why, during the Cold War, the US and Canada built a network of early warning radars from Greenland to Alaska to detect Soviet bombers coming south. America's rivals are not sleeping on this. In the past few years, Russia has reopened many old Soviet-era bases along its northern coast, which accounts for 53% of the Arctic coastline. China and Russia have also teamed up to conduct joint naval and air patrols in the region, and like anywhere else, the key to success is showing up. And Coast Guard officials for years have said that presence equals influence in the Arctic. But you often can't get to the Arctic without icebreakers, and while the US has 3 semi-functional icebreakers, Russia has 41 and China has at least 5. Building more is a good first step, but the US military writ large has a long way to go to shore up its Arctic presence. As you can imagine, operating in the Arctic is hard. Batteries die faster, fingers and toes get frostbite, everything gets wet, and just moving around takes longer. Troops need to eat more calories to have the energy to deal with it all, and they need more gas because engines usually run less efficiently in cold weather. But it's harder to get more supplies up there because there are so few ports, runways, and roads to use. I don't even think there are roads in most of the Arctic. Icebreakers aside, the lack of logistics, communication, and domain awareness infrastructure could limit the US military's effectiveness in the Arctic, according to a 2023 report by the RAND Corporation. They're a think tank based in Washington, D.C. Fewer satellites orbit that far north, the ionosphere interferes with long-range radio communications, the early warning radar network is becoming obsolete, and there are relatively few icebreakers or overflights to keep an eye on what's going on up there. Plus, Rand wrote, there are simply not enough polar-capable assets and trained personnel to maintain an Arctic presence at scale. There are efforts to change that, though. Governments and companies are looking to build up their constellation of polar communications and spy satellites, while the services are standing up new training programs and exercises to hone their Arctic skills. But perhaps the most important development is on the logistics side. In August, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers signed a $400 million contract to start converting the Port of Nome on Alaska's west coast into a deepwater port. That will give larger Coast Guard and Navy ships a place to stop that's a lot closer to the Arctic Circle than the existing deepwater ports at Dutch Harbor and Anchorage, which are further south. The first phase of that project is due to be complete by 2029, but it was not immediately clear how long the entire project would take. In the meantime, the Navy may reopen an air base in the Aleutian Islands, and the Air Force is extending one of its runways at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson so that it can take any military aircraft in any weather. But at the end of the day, most of the Arctic is water, so you need icebreakers that can move through that space and maintain a presence there. Hopefully, the US can build and buy them fast enough to make a difference. Alright, it's channel update time, and I'm going to make this one as quick as I can. I know I get rambly, but I really do enjoy just having this space where I get to go off script and ramble a little bit. Anyways, first up, corrections. This isn't really a correction, but somebody reached out to me via email at kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com about the USS Gerald R. Ford video that we did about how things break. This person, and I'm going to keep him anonymous, said that they were a sailor on the ship between 2016 and 2021, just as it was hitting the waters. And, wouldn't you know it, they were responsible for keeping the sewage system going, which we talked about because the toilets are breaking. Anyway, this individual said that the pumps were really close to like the propeller shafts, and the vibrations would shake the pumps, and then the seals would go bad, and then they'd have to replace them. He made recommendations that they should add dampening material around the pumps so they wouldn't vibrate, and instead the shipbuilders decided to add more pumps. The problem with that is that when you add more pumps without taking care of the initial failure problem, or the disease, and instead of going after the symptoms or whatever backwards, you're just going to get more pumps broken. So whenever one of these pumps would break, they basically have to shut down half the system, and it's just a big mess. So that was really great insight. I wanted to share it with you. If you guys have any corrections or even insight that we can throw in at the end to give the audience a bit more background on what we're talking about, that's always welcome. Kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com. We have a store.taskandpurpose.com, code actuallywash for 10% off. And I just really wanted to say thank you to everyone that's watching and supporting. It's been a lot of work. I'm coming up on a year of being the producer of the channel. We're finally starting to see actual numbers that aren't terrible. We're seeing 200, 300,000 views per video, which it's just me and David working on this. I'll take it. And that's all because a lot of you watching and supporting. It's been a really great experience. I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning a lot. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who stuck around, or new people that have found us and are still just giving us a chance to deliver this information to them. I don't take it for granted. I don't take it lightly. So thank you very much. I am Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for being here.